Ayodeji.
Hi, I'm Kachi.
And welcome to The Square, a podcast where we have honest conversations about life, pop culture, and everything in between with casual conversations from a global perspective.
That's right. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, and share. And make sure you let people know how awesome it is.
All right, let's get into the episode. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Square. It is your ever-present host, Ayodeji. I guess ever-present is crazy. And for once, I'm actually by myself, but you guys please bear with me. I will try not to make it too long. I just needed us to, continue to push, continue to encourage continuity, and just keep getting content out there. I think right now, one of the most important things to do is to be as consistent as possible. I know that you guys count on us for amazing content, which we always try to do. First things first, shout out to Kachi. It was her birthday the other day, big +1. Really excited about that. I saw that she had a really great time from her stories, so I'm glad that she celebrated well. She's presently feeling a bit poorly, so I'm sort of filling in for her, but is what it is. I can run it. But yeah, I guess how are you guys doing? I hope you guys are doing well. I hope everyone is good. I will just sort of fly. Actually, before I jump into it, how was my week? I had a decent week. I got my glasses done finally. Apparently, I can't see. I can't see. I don't know. Long story short, I got my glasses after like 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks thereabouts. Yeah, so really excited about that. Nothing interesting going on. Can I say this here? Actually, I can say this here. To be fair, if you know, you know. I'm touching Lagos for a bit. Need to represent a couple of things, tidy up some other things. So I'm coming back to Lagos. Super excited. By the time this comes out, I think I probably would be in Lagos. Well, if you're listening to this, probably would already be in Lagos. So you're just coming for a bit. Need to do some things. Yeah, so really, really excited. For the square this week, we have a couple of stories. I remember even this week when we're planning what we wanted to do before Kachi fell ill, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do anything too serious. But Nigeria never fails to disappoint. So what can I do? It's not my fault. I have to just talk about the things that we can talk about. But I guess I will try to make it as compact as possible. We'll see how far we get. So the first story in for the Central Square, the link is in the show notes. But I guess there was an incident in Edo State this week, right? And essentially what happened was, in a nutshell, there were 16 men who were traveling from Port Harcourt and River State to Kanu for the Eid al-Fitr. Also, shout out to all my Muslim friends and everyone who celebrates the holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan is over, so, happy Eid, everyone. Shout out to you guys and everyone else who celebrates. So these 16 guys were traveling from Port Harcourt to Kanu for Eid al-Fitr. I think it's featuring. You guys, please, I'm so sorry. My pronunciations for most things are quite poor. And so they were traveling and they were mistaken for kidnappers. Why? Because they had the local traditional guns and weapons that they used to hunt in Nigeria. They have like all these shabbily crafted guns and crude equipment for hunting, right? And when they were identified as such, it just went super duper left, like in a very, very unreal way. The vehicle they were in was stopped, was partially destroyed. They were, as people say, because all this is on social media right now, you can check X, all the news is there. They were identified as, or mistakenly identified as, Fulani herdsmen, So again, the connotations behind that is quite severe, and unfortunately, the 16 guys were essentially beaten and lynched, were set ablaze, and it just sort of escalated, the already tense situation in Nigeria. A lot of people online were linking this incident to something that happened last year, where Deborah was killed in the northern region of Nigeria for essentially, apparently, allegedly, because I didn't see that video or whatever else that she was alleged to say, but they alleged that she blasphemed against Prophet Muhammad, and that was sort of how things kicked off, and she was beaten and lynched. So, there's already a lot of ethnically motivated tension in Nigeria. So it's very, very tragic to read right now. I guess my main thing in highlighting the story. It's just that I feel that we need to be more careful. We need to be more tidy. We need to, lean more towards, security forces. We need to ensure that we obey the rule of law. I think that, we do often do many things aside from, follow the rule of law. So it's quite troubling to read. And it also says a lot about, I guess our confidence in, the police and the local security forces and essentially local security people, Yeah. So, and another thing I wanted to sort of highlight with regards to that is it's important that we don't get to a place where we start to resemble or look or behave like a Rwanda, essentially, right? It's really, really important that doesn't sort of get to that level. And for anyone that doesn't know, I put a short video in the show notes, but it is what happened in Rwanda was in the 90s, there was a civil war between the majority tribe who were in power against the other minority tribes. And it was a bloody and terrible situation. Over, I think, 800,000 Rwandans died. At that time, that was about a tenth of the population. Over 250,000 women were raped and killed. Well, no, sorry, over 250,000 women were raped, right? So I want to be accurate with that. And it was just essentially a very, very ethnically motivated incident, and it was very, very difficult for the country to legislate one, and for the people to get past that, because the civil war, the genocide, was in, I think, 94. It was carried over, I think, over 100 days, and it just sort of went. It was just a really, really terrible incident. So I think that we should just, learn the lessons from those incidents and not take matters into our own hands and not profile people based on what they sound like or how they look or whatever misconception that we may have, because whether or not those people that were killed were Fulani herdsmen or not, the point is that I don't think that people have the right to take laws into their own hands. There shouldn't be situations where, like, you hear that people are being killed. I think it's ridiculous. It's crazy. It shouldn't happen, but Nigeria is still a developing economy, so it is very, very troubling to hear. But hopefully we can learn from these situations and be better as a whole, I hope. And yeah, but that's the main story for the Central Square. I just wanted to highlight. I think that, we just need to be more careful with how things come together. Okay. So, hi guys, back again. So I just want to discuss two really, really quick sort of things that have been on my mind this week that I've been discussing with a bunch of people, and just sort of things that I think is important that we start to think about a little bit more, and I think we put into greater perspective, because, and I think for people in and around my age, right, people that are in their mid to late 20s, we sort of grown up with this sort of phenom, and it escalates a little bit. I think that, and obviously we won't fully know how well, I guess, or how far or how good or how bad this can be, because, as I said, this is a developing story and situation. But I think that it's important to focus on the hidden costs of, in my opinion, social media. But I guess you can coin it as constant connection, right? I do think that, and this is my own personal opinion, I don't think that human beings were designed to connect and discuss and interact with so many people all the time, right? I just don't think that right now as a people we are optimized for that level of interconnection. And because of that, there is a lot of costs that come with it, right? I think that one of the greatest ills is the unnatural level of interconnection that it demands, right? Because at the end of the day, when you, for example, put something else on X, it goes viral. Every man and their dog wants to comment, wants to say something, wants to have an opinion on it. And, for good or for bad, it's their right. Everybody can say what they want to say. But when you're the focus of attention, or when you're on the receiving end of such communication, it can be overwhelming. When I say viral, I mean things that go far and wide, getting conversations and interaction with people from all over the world, from Paris, from Australia, from Taiwan, Rwanda, literally anywhere, right? So I do think that it's something to sort of keep in mind, because as humans, we evolve to engage in close-knit communities, right? Like the way before social media, right? At least, and I don't want to sound old, but when we're younger, social media was still up and coming. It wasn't really the primary way to connect and meet and even keep up with people. It just wasn't, right? You would go to people's houses, you would sit down with them, you would have a conversation with them. At the time, phone calls, or rather telephones and GSM and all that kind of thing was they're up and running. So you give someone a call, but more often than not, it was always meet up and talk with people in person, right? That was just always sort of how it would go, and I just think that, the overstimulation from these like endless notifications and opinions and just, I guess, even social comparisons leads to a lot of anxiety, loneliness, and even, in my opinion, burnouts. Like I often find myself needing a break a lot of the time when I've been on my device or on my phone or whatever, just for a long period of time. I just don't want to be on X. I don't want to be on Insta. I don't want to be. I just want to just sort of come off and just sort of reflect inwards and just, my opinion, just keep things to myself, right? And just sort of, get to better grounding before I can come back, because it is a lot. I was on X I think this morning, this afternoon. I was reading something. A lady tweeted. She just had amazing food from a restaurant. It was really great. She ordered it again for lunch, again for dinner. It was amazing. Someone else commented and said, "What's the restaurant?" Because I assume she wants to know. Maybe she can just sort of weigh up whether or not she wants to order from there or not. The conversation just goes left, and then just like, "Oh, go to hell." Like, why are you asking me questions? And like, another thing is that you don't even understand the mental state that people are in. And, you can often be on the receiving end of so many things when, in my opinion, you're just trying to ask a harmless question. And then that conversation then sparked greater conversation. And then those sets of tweets went viral, and then people are for and against both sides. And then you're now in the middle of some crazy dialogue just because you just wanted to know where you can order, I don't know, some chicken and rice or salad or something. Doesn't make any sense to me. I really do think that, we need to foster more meaningful connections. And I think that we need to use social media more intently, right? So that we don't sort of fall into that trap of, trying to always be switched on or, perform or, do the smile and wave thing, because like, it's almost like there's a spotlight on you when you come online and you feel like you need to sort of perform in a way and manner that you've identified yourself as socially, regardless of whether or not you feel like you even want to behave like that at any given point, right? So it's just, something to sort of keep in mind, because I just think that exposure to like an overwhelming number of perspectives, which are often extreme or divisive, can create a lot of disconnect, and you just don't feel the level of unity and connection that perhaps we did feel back in the day when we didn't have this level of social media. Yeah. And obviously, I'm not saying that social media is all bad. I think obviously it has a lot of benefits. I think like, the advent of long distance relationships and, virtual meetings, remote work and things of that nature, make social media really, really great, for everyone. Right? And I think that with every tool and with every invention, it's as useful as destructive as, the user decides to wield it. And I just think that, just to, again, round off on that, is I do believe that we need to use social media more intentionally, right? We need to be careful of mindless scrolling. I'm talking to you guys that love, and I'm even talking to myself because I love scrolling on TikTok, right? You can end up like, I literally say all the time, like, if you want to sit down on TikTok all day, I promise you can. You fucking can, because it's amazing. The algorithm is so fantastic, brings you everything that you could possibly think that you need, and even things that you don't need, and then you then get on into all these foxholes, and you could just be there for hours. So you definitely need to be more intentional with that. I do think, and people say this a lot, right? And I haven't done it before. Well, that's not true. I put my phone on DND when I need to do something productive, when I need to work, when I need to record this podcast. My phone is on DND, so I'm not going to get any notifications, right? But some people use their phones in a way that when they're actively using it, notifications don't come through for some certain apps. Like they just don't see the notification bells or the little number that comes on top of the app. They just don't get any of that, right? And I think that potentially can be super, super duper helpful. And I think the last thing, which one I always want to emphasize, is prioritizing mental health. I think you should be able to assess yourself where you are at every given point in time, and then make decisions that are best for you at every given point in time. Legitimately, prioritize yourself, pick yourself, choose yourself, do what you need to do so that you can be okay in yourself, right? Just be careful with how you use social media. Like I said, it's great, but ups and downs. Okay, and the second topic, or the last topic, I don't know, depends on how this goes, is, and again, I was having a conversation again today, or was it yesterday, right? I do really think that it is important that we learn how to set better boundaries. I love some of my friends because they are the masters of boundaries. They're like, no, I'm not having this. I'm not fucking having this. You have to respect that because what can you do? Like, one of the best parts about having a phone when someone calls you and they start to tell you some BS, you're like, nope, put that down. I'm not having this. You're able to, to essentially dictate the ways and means that people interact with you and the things that you allow into your life. Lots of women pride themselves in being very strict in relationships, and they're like, I'm just not gonna have this or take this from any person I decide to date, right? And I think as a human being, you have that prerogative to do that, and I love that. But I think that it's important that you then extend those relationship and dating boundaries into your personal life. I think it's really important that you need to have boundaries with your family, your friends, people at work, and even just like random people you meet on the road, like day to day people, right? I think that with family is always complicated because, family, they play a very pivotal role in your life. They're there for you, they support you, and they sort of go through the things that you go through in life. And because, they know you or they feel like they know you, they perhaps often try to assert a level of influence over your life. And for good or for bad, they do because they care about you, right? But it's important that, the older that you get and the wiser you get and the greater the understanding that you have about the things that you want, things that you don't want, right? You need to be able to set boundaries. Example, it's often very hard for people to set boundaries with their mothers. Your mother, especially as a man, right? As a firstborn man, the mom always wants to, advise you and help you and tell you what to do and this and that and this and that. But you need to be able to tell her, look, mom, love you, appreciate you, but I need to be able to live and die by my own decisions. I need to decide things that I want to do, right? Like I will make mistakes for sure, but I need to be able to make decisions myself. Freedom isn't given. You kind of have to take it, right? And just sort of having that level of leeway and expansion with your family, I think it's really, really important. I lost the advice that, and I said this to my mom one time, and it even led to a bigger issue. I was like, oh yeah, like you give me advice. I appreciate that, but it's advice. It is optional. I'll decide what I want to do, right? And it's more, a lot of times it's quite difficult for parents to come to grips with that. So, the closer that you are with them and the deeper the emotional connection or the bond that you guys have, right? It's more difficult for them to understand that I've heard what you have to say, but I'm doing things the way I want to do it. And I think that's fine. And I think that parents just need to find a way to calm down, accept that you're making your decision. Again, for good or for bad, but you need to be able to live with your decisions, in my opinion, at least, because you will fuck up sometimes. You won't always get it right. It's always better to live and die by your own decisions because you won't be looking at anybody to blame, right? One of the things I always credit my father for doing was that he never, ever, ever said, okay, you're going to this school, you need to study this, that, and the other. Never said that. Ever, 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 ever. And so every academic decision that I've made in terms of the things I wanted to study and the places I wanted to study, I have made the decisions myself, legitimately. And he just like, do your best, push, study hard, and, good decisions. And like, obviously, they're always there to guide you and always there to support you, but he never really said, okay, you need to do this. Like, I've never heard that. Like, oh my gosh, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be an engineer. Never heard that from any of my parents, to me, or to any of my siblings, ever, 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 ever. That is something I credit them for. I do know that obviously some people have had different experiences. I know that some people, come from a family of lawyers, get me a lawyer, mate. It just is what it is, So if you feel that that's not what you want to do, I think it's always important to initiate conversations and to let them, know where you're coming from, especially when you have fully thought through the idea, in my opinion, right? Unfortunately, it's a bit trickier with workplace relationships because there are certain expectations and demands that employers will make of you. And it becomes more difficult to enforce certain boundaries. For example, over time, working from home, like, over the last year, I worked for a professional services company when I was in Lagos. Amazing. I had an amazing, manager, amazing team, but Jesus Christ, the hours were insane. The workload was insane. Like, I remember so many different holidays I worked over, even like the Christmas break, like literally I worked a couple of days over Christmas trying to get some pieces of work done, sent off in time, reviewed, and just different things of that nature. So it is a lot and more difficult to set boundaries, but I think that you do need to find a bit of balance, right? I do think that especially with overtime and working weekends and doing things like that, you just need to sort of assess where you are, because you don't, and again, it's not even to your managers or your teams or the company's benefit if you're not at your best, right? If you feel like you're about to be burnt out, you should have a conversation with them. Look, I've been working really hard. I'm not feeling at my best. I might need some time, or whatever the case may be. I don't think you should be too afraid to communicate your desires to your team leads. And if you're listening and you're a team lead, please endeavor to listen to your people. Right, I just sort of give them the room and space to express their concerns and express whatever issues that you've had, because I've worked in places in my life where I've been a manager or the manager. I've had people under me, and I've always sort of made that very clear that please come to me. I don't have a monopoly of knowledge or experience. I come to you, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about even in on a more simple level, my relationships, like, there's always a level of, oh my gosh, man, you need to lead, and blah, 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 separate issue, right? But as a leader, you should be open to feedback. You'll be open to conversation, right? So I think that when you want to assert boundaries at work, you need to communicate as much as possible and understand that at the end of the day, because it is work and because, they are paying you to do the work, regardless of how good or how bad the pay is, you still need to be able to set boundaries in those aspects of life, right? And obviously with everyday people, I think that setting boundaries, helps protect your personal space and your mental space. I think that without boundaries, people may feel like, well, I would personally feel like, you're taking advantage of me, you're taking the piss, you're essentially just trying to be a clown, right? And that often leads to situations where disrespect comes in, right? You start to feel overwhelmed, and just a whole lot of rubbish happens when you don't assert your boundaries. And you do feel like shit when you feel like someone is railroading you or walking all over you because you haven't set boundaries. And I know it's tough because not everybody is as assertive as they would like to be. I do think I've met some really lovely, nice people who, how can I say this? I've met some people who sometimes would make it easy for you as an individual to be able to walk all over them. That sounds fucked up. So I'll try and take it back again. People that have more accommodating personalities and mindsets and behavioral traits, right? If you're a more assertive, in quotation marks, dominant, whatever you want to call it, person, you can tend to assert some level of influence over these kind of people. But I do think that it's important to be as considerate and as mindful as you can, because if the roles were reversed, you would not like some of the treatment that you give them. So I think that we all need to be as mindful of others as we would like them to be mindful of us, right? And that's where I'm coming from with that. And at the end of the day, at its core, at the very base of the foundation, setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. It's an act of self-preservation. And when respected by others, it creates healthier and more fulfilling connections. I believe that if you keep these sort of two things in mind in this day and age that we are, where everything is evolving and new things are happening every day, if you're able to control how much social media affects your personality, and you're able to set healthy and important boundaries. And even again with the boundaries thing, it's important to always be as respectful as you can. I forgot to mention that when you're speaking to people, and you're trying to say, oh, I don't like this, or maybe don't do this, or don't press too hard on that, whatever. Try and be as nice and as respectful and as accommodating as possible, right? And so that they can understand you as best as possible. And that's sort of where I'm coming from with that. So I think that if you sort of keep those two things in mind in terms of how you use social media and setting boundaries, I think you would have a more healthy relationship with your friends, your family, healthier relationship with your phone, your devices, right? And you would be in a more improved mental state. And these are my, hot takes right now, things that have been on my mind. And I hope that, we can all sort of follow these processes, and, the life will become easier and more bearable and tidier. I hope we all have a good week. Next week, or rather next episode, we'll see what we can push out. But thank you guys for listening so far. I really, really appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have a great week, and